Hey, you're dropping the peace signs. All you groovy cats and kittens. Is that what the kids say?
Carol Baskins.
what are Give me the vernacular. Happy 420. Some of you at least were waiting for this to happen. So now we can say the Clearance Jobs content team has delivered. You have questions about drug use. We have answers. I was talking to Jill before the call started. I don't even know why 420 is a thing. Katie, do you know the origin story? Why is it 420?
I used to because I was curious, but I could not articulate that right now.
I don't know if you're watching. Anybody, drop it in the comments and let us know if you know why 420 is a thing. We don't know. Also, drop us a comment so we know you're watching. Hey, Farina, until the first comment comes, I don't actually trust that we're live. So thank you for dropping a comment. We were talking about drug use and your security clearance. If you haven't downloaded it yet, I believe I posted hopefully the link in the description. If not, I'll add it later. Again, we're talking about drug use considerations for folks interested in a national security career because we recently did a study at Clearance Jobs and we asked young people ages 18 to 30 about their perceptions of drug use and drug policies in the federal government. So these are not folks that currently have a clearance, but they're in that coveted demographic that we're trying to. What's with the tie-dye, Jason? It's 420. We're talking about drugs. If you're on drugs,
Wake and bake.
Wake and bake, people. Here was the key takeaway from the study. If you have used drugs previously, please don't weed yourself out of a security clearance career. That is what the young people are doing. And 1 in 5 candidates said current drug laws were preventing them from considering a career with the federal government. Were you guys surprised by that? First, I'm curious. 1 in 5. I actually thought it could have been higher, maybe. I don't know. But 1 in 5 said just say no to national security careers.
Yeah, that was surprising for me. And honestly, with the research, I was even more surprised at folks that were just willing to disclose this kind of information instead of that, like not sure, not willing to answer. So I was surprised to see that as well.
Yeah, that's because that was an option, I think, for some of those questions. Not sure, unwilling to answer. I don't know who allowed those people to give that response, but somebody did.
You always got to give people an out in surveys, just all the answers provided there just for wherever they're at. I just say, I think you have to take a moment to think through, we want the younger population to come and join us in national security and join the field. And 1 in 5 can sound low, but that does translate to a pretty significant number for our candidate pool of people who either might have STEM degrees or even language proficiency, that they would be an asset in our industry. And they're being weeded out. So I think it is a pretty significant number.
Yeah, I think the destigmatization is key in this, right? Because we asked several questions, and what I found also super interesting is if you check out the survey, we asked about drug use, polygraphs, mental health questions, and this is a panel study of young people. So it wasn't like we were specifically like, hey, I don't think we're like, hey, let's talk about drugs. We're talking about national security career interest. Having to report drug use was the highest factor that they reported that would prevent them from pursuing a national security career, which was definitely shocking for me. I thought mental health or polygraphs would for sure rank higher. So I was surprised, but I think it just shows because it's probably hitting more people, right? There are more people in that, more people have that to report. So because more respondents, because I data, man, I think 30-ish% said that they had smoked or used. There's so many different ways to consume it now. I can't even say smoke. Had used a marijuana derivative in the past year. So I think there's just more people affected by that. And just the prevalence of weed. It's legal in more states.
Right, agreed. And I mean, watching a ton of these comments come in, a lot of people are just intimidated by the process because of their former drug use. I mean, I know that we've talked about, that's not necessarily going to prevent you all in, one from obtaining a clearance or a federal career, but I think kind of the notion that maybe they do ingest marijuana and then we'll have to stop, obviously, once obtaining a clearance. It is intimidating for a lot of people, I think, who aren't, within this space already.
Yeah, and Danielle, the money question.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say it's 40% who said they've used marijuana. So that was the respondents, with only 31% saying CBD. So CBD was less, but marijuana was definitely higher. So
Daniel asked the question, is like, why is marijuana use even an issue? And I think if you're not in the national security community, you're going to have that, right? If you're in one of the 21 states where it's legal recreationally, or more states where it's legal from a medicinal standpoint, you're going to say, why is marijuana an issue in the security clearance process? And it's because federal law. So I think what we get the pushback from the policy community around the security clearance process, like, hey, we can't do anything about this, it's federal law. And that is the case. So we see ODNI kind of moving the needle around when they consider abstinence for marijuana. It used to be 1 to 2 years was gold standard. So do not do drugs for 1 to 2 years prior to applying. What ODNI provide clarifying guidance about, I think back in 2020, was that, hey, it's from the point of application. So we want to say point of application, don't do it. Now, that said, we're still going to have some suitability guidelines where it could be different. But I think if you've used drugs even as recently as like yesterday, and then you're applying for a security clearance today, as long as you sign that EQIP today, theoretically, you don't have grounds for a security clearance denial based on that. So I think that's just like key news you can use. I've seen several questions come in about medicinal marijuana. Same thing. Still Schedule 1 narcotics, still illegal at the federal level. Until that changes, it doesn't matter if it's medicinal or recreational. Marijuana is a clearance no-no if you currently hold a security clearance.
Well, and I know the bigger issue, me being a former recruiter, the human capital aspect of it. And, looking through this research, 10% of respondents said, yes, I have withdrawn an application for a job requiring a clearance because of policy. And, it's kind of, until Congress changes something, we're just kind of stuck here. But I really like how we laid out in the white paper, clarifying policy is our best step forward, if it's still going to be federally illegal. So I guess time will tell when it comes to, candidates who are, in the private sector and, able to work from home and smoke or ingest what they want. I guess we'll just see how the next decade rolls out.
Hinging a lot on Congress, people. I don't know. But James did ask a question. So, hey, if it becomes legal at the federal level, do we have to wait for any other policy change? No. But what we've cautioned before at clearance jobs is just because you see, again, it's not going to happen tomorrow. This is Congress, people. But if we find that marijuana is legalized, you cannot just go out the next day and start doing drugs, because you're going to have to look at your agency suitability guidelines. Now, for the security clearance process, the policy is illegal drug use. So that's why you can't do it now. As soon as federal law changes, they won't have to change anything in the security clearance process. But if you want to keep your employment, and there's a chance you'll ever be drug tested, I might wait, because there could be some suitability or even individual company guidance. So companies, okay, from being a recruiter, read the fine print, because a lot of folks in the national security community will still have drug-free workplace requirements. Because of the work that's done. And if you're in a drug-free workplace and you're not allowed to do drugs as part of your job, it doesn't matter if the federal law changes, you're still going to run into issues. Congress, man, Jeff, yes. I didn't wear tie-dye for nothing. If I can't talk about the man a little bit, then yeah. Congress would have to change the policies. But the education piece, that is the key factor. And that's what clearance jobs were here to help. I've written nearly 500 articles about this, people. I care about you and your drugs deeply. But the 4% of respondents got the policies right. I thought that was the key takeaway for me. I don't know, Jill, you felt the same. Jill actually knows how to read data, unlike me. I make things up as I go.
That's not true. You know way more than you let on. So No, I think that's the biggest takeaway is the education piece of it. Even within the workplace, just the more that either the federal government or like FSOs can educate their workplace on what the requirements are, and I think we're seeing those different improvements. Even like changes to the SF-86, where like putting some of that language in that in the future form of saying, just so you know, like this is what this means that you're going to be abstaining from marijuana use. Having that extra verbiage in there so that applicants are informed. And then ongoing like clearance holders also need to be informed because it's pretty common with 21 states having it legalized or having some form of it's decriminalized. It does create a little bit of confusion, and it's really, really common for people to think, "Hey, as long as I'm in the right state, I can do what I want." That's because it's legal here, and then suddenly realizing later, "Oh, that wasn't the case." Now I need to report that and kind of go through. So I think that's what leads to it. The more states that come on board and change that, and it still stays the same way at the federal level, it just kind of creates this weird limbo land where, you know, people aren't always sure what to do.
Well, confusion because we have the different stages of it, right? People are confused about what they can do prior to applying and obtaining a position, and then it's clear here when you don't have a clearance yet, you're also very confused about what you can do after you might obtain a security clearance. And again, the more we can destigmatize the process, it is super intimidating filling out that SF-86. And I think there's just a lot of folks who might hear about the things that you have to report and say, "Oh, I have to report my drug use." No. I mean, the government does not care if you were doing drugs, even in a state where it was illegal. I mean, unless you did some other crazy stuff. But the whole person concept applies too. And I think that's worth noting. Like whatever these issues are, they're looking at the whole person. So because that was one of the factors too, folks like, hey, marijuana use is one factor among many that will make your security clearance determination. I think people kind of assume it's like a check yes or no system. Oh, I've done this and this and this, then I cannot work in national security. And it's not that straightforward. I mean, there are literally no issues that are that straightforward. We've seen some crazy stuff that people have done.
Well, that's the other thing I was going to say, like, but even background of investigators, adjudicators, folks working in national security, like nobody's perfect. I mean, they've seen some pretty insane stories. So, if depending on what you've done in your background, it may be intimidating, but I think people have seen crazier.
Yeah. And I guess I think age is a factor here too. I think I think Sean Bigley, our legal correspondent at Clearance Jobs, he's written about that too, in the sense of, they will consider a lot of those Doha cases will list age. So this is a panel study of young people. And it just surprises me that a lot of young people think that the government will care more about their marijuana use than is the reality. And the fact that you were doing drugs as a young person is a mitigating factor in doing that. Like I was young, I was in college, I was in this environment around drug use versus more ingrained habits. If you've been a drug user for 20 to 30 years, you're going to get more questions. But I've seen those people as well also be able to obtain a security clearance. I've seen several of those Doha cases where someone was initially denied a security clearance because they had been a habitual drug user, but they said, "Hey, I want this career. I care about it. I'm willing to abstain from drug use. Move on." And the government looked upon that favorably. So I think there's just a big education piece that we have to get across, that drug use is not a clearance killer.
Yeah. I think there was one really cool fact is that from the study that there was a pretty decent percentage who said, "Hey, if I do get the clearance, I would be open to stopping. I would stop in order to apply, and I would stop in order as long as I had the job, I would stop." So I thought that was great that even though a lot will walk away, 25%, there is a sizable amount who are saying, "Yeah, actually, I would abide by that." But I think that's where the education piece is so helpful, where if we can make sure that people are educated, that way we don't risk them unnecessarily losing their clearance or being denied when they didn't fully understand what went into the process.
Yeah. And Cameron asked if you can reapply if you're denied a security clearance based on drug use. Absolutely, yes. That's where I would say if you're denied a security clearance for whatever reason, that's your chance to get your house in order for whatever reason, the cause of denial or revocation. You cannot reapply for another clearance job for a year, but after that point, and a year is a lot of time to mitigate a lot of issues. So if you can abstain from drug use for a year and then reapply, I wouldn't like if you get denied clearance for, so I'm saying you can do drugs the day before you submit your application, unless you're denied your clearance for using drugs. And then I would probably abstain for a year. So it's just, I mean, consider your personal situation around all of this. But I mean, that's a big mantra that we have. I'm all about it's not a perfect person process. And we need, again, more young people. We need diverse talent and voices and perspectives in this. I'm big on like, we need Tony Starks, not just Captain America's. That's one of my taglines. Cool. I've been on a Marvel kick lately, so I'm, got to go with it. Any other thoughts on what we need to educate people about better when it comes to drugs?
I think, the policy is pretty black and white, in my opinion. It's illegal under federal law. So, I mean, if you have a clearance, you really shouldn't be doing drugs. But what I find are a little more, gray and kind of murky are some of the stories that we've written about at the news site. And Jill, I know you can speak to this a little bit. And on the Clearance Jobs blog, we did have, we've had this story multiple times from different posters, but if you have a spouse or a cohabitant that is engaging in these activities and you necessarily aren't, like, what do you do? I mean, since you're aware of this crime, happening, should you tell your FSO? And so I think those stories are a little bit more murky. And so educating around that piece, mainly the advice that we've given is you want to separate yourself as much as possible, either from this person or from the act. I know that especially if it's for medical purposes, it does tend to get a little bit wonky. But so those are the stories I think that we should educate, folks on a little bit more as well.
Did Perry share that story? Yeah. He did?
He did. He did. So as a federal employee who she self-reported because she had to, her mom had, I believe it was cancer. And so she had to administer or even acquire medicinal marijuana for her. And so because she was open and honest and self-reported, she ultimately did not lose her clearance. He would have a better specific telling of all the details.
You can tell the story better than Perry Russell Hunter. Directly.
Exactly. I totally sliced right through and did not do any justice of what he originally had. But I think the key is the open communication. And there are times in a situation like that, if you're willing to take the risk because the need of who, like, somebody you're trying to care for outweighs that. He's saying the goal is not to make your life hard and to make you miserable and not to have you not be able to be there for your mom. Everybody wants you to be there for your mom. Like, we don't want you to like not be able to care for the people in your life. Now that's like a more extreme situation, but the policy is there just for you as the employee, but also that you also have to be open and honest and self-report and seek to follow the guidelines as much as possible. And because they want to know you're trustworthy and, you can be relied on. We can trust you with everything. So that's, that's the goal.
Should I blow up the video chat? Is now the time? But I think that points to another good question, because we had that same thread that came up on the blog where the guy wanted to get medicinal marijuana for his wife who had cancer, and he asked his security officer and they said no. Yeah. And so Sean, I'm throwing Sean under the bus many times on this video chat, but he has written about that at Clearance Jobs. Sometimes this is like my mantra in life. If you don't get the answer you want the first time, go around. But I think Sean has talked about how you can report directly to DOHA and a process for doing that. So I think sometimes just know your security officer is reading the tea leaves and giving you the best advice they can. But there is a lot of policy nuance around CBD drugs, a lot of this stuff. And the hard and fast should be that you're not doing drugs. But if you're trying to deal with like a family member who has cancer, know that you're probably getting best advice from your security officer. And it is, I don't know if it's okay, but I'm going to say theoretically maybe go straight to DOHA or call me, because I'm a sucker for a heartwarming story and I'll try to get a better answer. But I think in cases like that, sometimes people sometimes claim to know the policy and it's just they're doing their best interpretation of what the policy is. And so if you have a family member, again, who has this, a need for medicinal marijuana and you're willing to take steps, I think what they generally require is like, how are you separating yourself from it? What is your process? Do you have somebody else who can administer this? But it's not as cut and dry as sometimes we want it to be, as we're dealing with this issue of this big disparity between what the federal and state laws are. Accidental drug use. Jeff, is that what you're talking about? That's a favorite. I mean, who hasn't? I go to the wrong parties. I'm telling you. I mean, my brother has a pot farm and I've still never been able to procure. He's never given me the right gummies. I'm pretty sure. 90% sure. Again, this is where reporting things I think should save you. And it's better to do that than to get test positive on a drug test. I think I've seen several questions about that. How honest do you want to be? Well, if you have to ask that question, then maybe a national security career isn't for you. You just have to be honest on the forms. You just have to, because getting caught lying on your SF-86 or any of your clearance forms is going to be a bigger issue than anything else or any other factor. Thoughts on that? The honesty, forgiveness, and Julian?
I like it. I mean, I think the government cares more about you lying than when you like smoked pot at a party or parties. So yeah, I mean, I think honest and open communication, that's the biggest. What is that under personal conduct? Lying on the SF-86. That's a big reason for revocation and denial. So just be honest.
Yeah. And we had the question, I mean, more of my favorite questions coming in: ketamine and psychedelics in your security clearance. The question comes in with those. We have had questions about that because the VA has actually done pilot studies using ketamine. It is a prescription at a prescription level. So if you're recreationally using ketamine or psychedelics, that's a different issue. 420, why not? But if you have a prescription, a legal prescription for a drug that's not, again, the marijuana issue is just that it is still a Schedule I illegal drug, and Congress would have to fix that. But there are other drugs, and this is why we always people are always like, it's so hypocritical. I know, we can't do anything about it. There are other drugs that you can be prescribed that can be misused, but if you're using them correctly and per prescriptions, and you won't run into issues. So I just think like knowing, again, staying on the right side of law and policies, what you have to be. And until federal law changes, using marijuana is illegal. It's a constitutional law lesson. I've been reading a James Madison biography, Father of the Constitution. So we can talk later. Our next LinkedIn Live could be about the Constitution. Bring this full circle. Anything else, ladies, I didn't touch on for 420 that you're really dying to like? Funds high.
But I had high hopes. My hopes were high in talking about. I don't know. I think CBD was an interesting statistic, and that was lower in a younger population, not by much, but it still was lower than actual marijuana use, which I don't want to say that's something that
yet, Jill. Who needs?
Sorry,
use it for my muscle aches, Jill. Right?
Yeah. But it is something that's like, something that clearance holders, if you're going to be regularly tested, something to consider. Again, Sean Bigley has written a lot about this as well before, and just that there can be traces of THC in the CBD products, and it's not regulated. And so, if you get called in for testing, you can be like, it was my CBD, you can try that, but it's going to start a long process that maybe you don't really want to go through.
Document. If you're going to get high, you better know your supply. That's like one of my life mantras. But just know where it's coming from, because we've had that with CBD. Like if you're going to use any product that you think might make you, you better keep your receipts from those poppy seed muffins. That's all I'm saying. DOD is saying if you eat a lot of poppy seed, you better have that receipt. You better show why. Documentation can save you. It's a critical factor in keeping your clearance eligibility. The disorganized people like me, we have a harder road when it comes to clearance processing. If you can document your CBD product, what you've purchased, that you've used it, you have a decent chance coming out on the other side of a Doha case and keeping your eligibility. Yeah. Anything else, Katie, that we didn't touch on?
No, I don't think so. I think this white paper pretty much covered it. So everyone should download it and read it if they're interested in policy or the security clearance process or getting young people interested in these careers. We desperately need people. And so, like we've said, the education
Mhm.
piece is really important for those coming into the ranks.
Yeah, so check out
Yeah.
the white paper.
I
Go
think
ahead.
No, I think it's such a good thing to start the conversation, and so that you are educating people and that you're not that we do have younger candidates still entering the market, even if they have history, like just to not to try to like fence everything around it so they can't get in. And I think the federal government's doing a great job in making a lot of different changes lately to try to have this conversation, to educate. They've done a great job in trying to educate on mental health as well. That's another piece of the puzzle. And the marijuana piece is a big deal to people as well. And so I think there's been a push for that. And I think as long as that keeps going, whether or not the laws change, we really want the next generation to come on in and join in national security work.
Yeah, well, no, I think that's like a big piece of it is that there are career opportunities out there, and I think we have this push to hire and onboard more folks with diverse backgrounds and coming from different experiences, and knowing that like, hey, this is what the policy is, and this is what it isn't. They've done a great job of doing that with mental health, I think, and I was shocked that again, like we teased you at the beginning, that more people were concerned about reporting their drug use than mental health issues. And that's like, I think, a good sign that the education piece on, hey, destigmatizing mental health, people are not ashamed of mental health treatment, maybe the same way they are, but they still kind of have this idea that, oh, if I have to report drug use, that's going to be a big issue. So I think, the more we can educate, answer questions, we do that all the time at Clearance Jobs. So if you have questions about the process, let us know. We're happy to help. And yeah, your path to a security clearance career, don't weed yourself out, people, on 420 or any other day. If you do drugs today, you can still apply for a clearance tomorrow, but to wait till tomorrow. I mean,
Just
maybe
don't reference this video.
just I heard on Clearance Jobs, this is not legal advice. This is not, I'm not an attorney this does not constitute legal advice. I'm not telling you to do drugs. Nobody should do drugs. Don't do drugs. Don't do drugs. But if you do drugs, don't not apply for a security clearance just because you did drugs. What is in the past is in the past. Tomorrow is a new day. National security careers need you. So all of you young people, and they're not, I don't think there's many young people. I mean, 40%, maybe that is high. I don't know. But I don't think it's not as prevalent sometimes as we also make it out to be. And we want to make sure that we, inform and educate people like, hey, whatever is in your past, there is still an opportunity to pursue a national security. I need to stop talking or the longer I talk, it's my problem every time, ladies. That's where it gets dangerous. It gets dangerous. But thank you everyone for tuning in. Thank you, Katie and Jill, for going on this together. Happy 420, people. Go get your munchies, get your snack on, and get a security clearance job. Bye.